Welcome, everybody. And I am so happy to welcome you to the fourth of four conversations that I have been having with various leaders in our community looking at the subject of Jewish education in 2021. Now, of course, the subject 2021 was just a play on the fact that these discussions were happening at the end of 2020, but we really are looking with an eye to the future. Don't hold me to the fact that this has to happen in the next 12 months. It might take a while, but we are so privileged, and I am so excited to welcome our guest this evening in Netana Shek. Netana is the Chief Jewish Identity and Engagement Officer at Federation CJA. She's an accomplished leader in the private and not-for-profit sectors. Prior to assuming this role, she led the Federation CJA's Passport to Jewish Life and Generations Fund for 12 years. Her achievements include driving major educational and engagement-related change initiatives at Federation CJA that are widely referred to as some of the most strategic, innovative, and successful in North America. Netana has raised over $160 million. That is a lot of money, by the way, for anyone to raise. Netana has raised over $160 million in supplemental gifts for Israel and Federation, and propelled Federation CJA's Jewish education and engagement agenda forward. This includes strategic, operational, and fiscal oversight, as well as hands-on experience piloting, launching, and evaluating hundreds of programs and grant processes across the fields of both formal and informal Jewish education and engagement. Working in partnership with senior management, lay leadership, and philanthropic families and foundations, Netana has developed, executed, and evaluated bold theories of change. Wow, what an honor. Netana, I am so thrilled to be able to have you here with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So, Netana, you've seen it all. You are an experienced community professional, and you have, from the perspective of A all the way through to Z, had your finger on the pulse and been deeply and intimately connected with Jewish education in Montreal specifically over the last number of years. How long have you been working in the Jewish community for?
I've been working in the Jewish community in Montreal for about 17 years.
Okay.
And prior to that, I lived in Israel. So in essence, I was working for the broader Jewish community.
The global Jewish community. Lovely, lovely. Well, I think to begin, some people might not know, and I use this by way of an introduction, that everything that is done, or that's a generalization, but most things I believe that are done from the Federation CJA's perspective are done based on data, are done based on best practices, are done based on knowing the lay of the land and exactly what it is that is the need, as well as the lack within any community initiative. Things are not pulled blindfolded out of a hat and let's just see if this sticks. And I think it would be very informative for our listeners, our watchers, those who are following this discussion, to actually take a step back and to see, please, if you could give us a snapshot of who the Montreal Jewish community is today. Perhaps from a broad global perspective. And then as we zoom in, this series is all about Jewish education and the future of Jewish engagement, identity building in teens and young adults, children. Perhaps we can zoom in, focusing on what it looks like in terms of how we will focus on the future. So what does the Jewish Montreal community look like today?
So, firstly, we have an amazing community in Montreal. Everybody who knows and interacts with Montreal compliments us on what an incredible community. And I have to stand back and say, knowing what exists across North America, we are very, very privileged. Mm-hmm. The community here is made up of about 90,000 Jews.
Okay.
And you may often hear that we have a declining population, but we don't. We have a changing population. And that changing population means that we have more or less the same numbers, but we have quite a precipitous increase in ultra-Orthodox.
Okay.
We have a stable population in the Sephardic community and a declining Ashkenazi community.
Okay,
So
I don't think that would be a surprise to many. Okay, that seems to be what everyone at least that's my understanding.
So the community is stable but changing. And today, approximately a little bit less than 1/3 are categorized as ultra-Orthodox. I may reference mainstream and ultra-Orthodox just as a way of talking about different population segments.
So the fastest growing community is the ultra-Orthodox, which is no surprise to anyone. And the ultra-Orthodox comprise at the moment of approximately just under 1/3 of the community.
Correct.
Fascinating. Okay. Would you say the other 2/3 are Sephardi, Ashkenazi equally? A third and a third?
No, it's much larger. Ashkenazi is still larger than 2/3, 1/3.
Okay.
And you have other populations. You have immigration from France, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You have a growing RSJ, communities from the former Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And they're creating a dynamic and incredible fabric of this community. So we have a mosaic of the community here in Montreal. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one of the beauties and the uniqueness of this community.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that is the snapshot of the community. And if we were to zoom in on specifically what you titled the mainstream Jewish community, and I think everyone realizes, or let me just be clear, what we mean by the mainstream Jewish community. We're talking about the non-Hasidic, non-ultra-Orthodox community, and essentially everyone else, and hopefully those who will be sending their kids to some type of Jewish educational experience, whether that be formal or informal. Zooming in a little bit, what does the snapshot look like in terms of Jewish education and those within our community who are sending their kids to a formal Jewish day school?
So that's a great question. Well, firstly, I want to state that Jewish day school is a bedrock of our community. We have a very high penetration rate, and that's directly responsible for maintaining the high affiliation rate we have in Montreal. We have 13 school systems.
Wow.
And 7 of those are mainstream or non-ultra-Orthodox.
Okay.
In the entire system, there's about 5,460 kids, and 60% or close to 60% of those are in the mainstream non-ultra-Orthodox schools, which accounts for 3,240 kids approximately. Okay. So if you look at what does this represent in terms of age eligible children, it's about 43%. I'm talking only non-ultra-Orthodox. It's about 43% of age eligible children, which is a very, very, very high penetration rate.
That was exactly, you anticipated my next question. So of all children, let's say from kindergarten age up until grade 11, here in Montreal we go to grade 11, of all Jewish children, about outside of the Hasidic non-ultra-Orthodox community, around 43% of such aged children are attending a Jewish day school.
Yes, indeed. Exactly.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah,
now,
it is
I'm not
truly
familiar
amazing.
with the numbers in America, but I know that they are much, much lower.
They are significantly lower.
Than 43%. So nearly 1 out of 2. Nearly 1 out of 2 Jewish kids today are in a formal Jewish school.
Indeed.
And that is fascinating and fabulous.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. We have wonderful schools and we have a wonderful community.
Is that number growing or is that number declining?
The number, interestingly enough, is increasing slightly, but it's based on the demographic So the market share is shrinking in terms of total numbers. We have less, let's remember what I said at the beginning, we have less Ashkenazi families and a stable-ish Sephardic community, which means that the pipeline feeder is decreasing. But if you look at what is the market share or the market penetration, that in and of itself is actually increasing slightly, which is incredible.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So of those Jews who are here, more of them are choosing Jewish schools than in the past.
Indeed, and we're very lucky, as many of you may know, in Quebec, we have access to a government grant, and that government grant provides about $4,800 for every child in high school, and about $3,800 for every child in elementary school, which allows us in Montreal to keep the tuition significantly lower than it is in many communities in Canada and certainly in the United States. So our tuition is lower and you still can access a higher quality of education.
That's fascinating. This was not one of my questions, but you've led me to it very naturally. Could you speak for a moment about the CAPS program and give a very short overview what it is and who might it help?
Certainly. Maybe what might be useful is to provide a full map of what the supports are for the Jewish day school system.
That would be great.
In Montreal, and then I'll go into the CAPS program because it's a piece of it.
Okay, excellent.
So every year, Federation provides approximately $3 million to the entire school system in tuition assistance support. And that's targeted towards lower income families. In addition, there is the CAPS program, which is a donor-funded initiative that allocates an additional $2.5 million every year to the non-ultra-Orthodox schools to help increase excellence in the schools and support middle-income families. I'll go back to that in a moment.
Okay.
This year, because of COVID-19, there was a crisis. And Federation raised from an incredibly generous community significant dollars, and $2.5 million was allocated to the entire school system to help the schools support families with additional tuition needs for this year, one-time tuition needs, increased costs in terms of PPE, online learning, and decreases in fundraising revenue. So that was an additional support to the Jewish day schools. All that said, to say Jewish day schools is very, very important to this community, and Federation is deeply committed to supporting that. The CAPS program is a program that is targeted to middle-income families. Before the program existed, we were seeing a vicious cycle in the schools. We were seeing that if you were a low-income family, you had access to some supports. And if you were a full-paying family, you didn't need it. But all the families in the middle were being squeezed slowly out of the system.
Yes.
And what that was doing was creating an increased dependency ratio where the schools had to cut costs in order to cover things like extracurricular activities, directors of development, directors of admission, and that in essence lowered the quality of education in the school, and hence some of the full-paying families were leaving. So the CAPS program at its essence looks at middle-income families who could pay a high proportion of the tuition for tuition, and it freezes their tuition based on total gross income of the family and the number of children. And what the fund does in essence is, sorry, I forgot to say that it freezes tuition for the families for the time the families are in elementary school and high school. So you could predict what your tuition will be. You could say, I feel confident I can enroll my child in elementary school, and I can know that I can support this and pay for this for the rest of the time that my child will be in the school. So that's the essence of the program. And the fund actually pays the difference between that tuition freeze that it calculates based on the variables that I said before, and the total tuition in the schools. It also encouraged the schools to raise tuition in the beginning to help support the actual cost of educating a child. We're looking back 10, 11, 12 years, the schools were priced too low, trying to retain families, and they couldn't support the educational excellence. So at its essence, the fund supports a whole band of middle-income families, and it infuses additional revenue per student, revenue per class, fundraising revenue into the system so that the schools can then reinvest in excellence.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah. What a wonderful institution the CAPS program is, as well as all of the help that Federation is putting into the Jewish day schools. Let's change subjects and move across the line somewhat, going from formal education to informal education. There's a variety of informal educational experiences that are offered in our city, whether that be summer camps, when we had Josh Pepin of Camp B'nai B'rith on a couple of weeks ago, whether we have BBYO, local chapters, NCSY, people who are meeting now, of course, all on Zoom, not in people's homes. What is the impact on a child who does not go to a Jewish school, but is nevertheless involved in a Jewish summer camp? From your research and from the data that you are an expert at, that it's your bread and butter to be studying these reports and statistics, what is Jewish summer camp and other informal experiential opportunities doing for a child or teen who may not go to a Jewish school?
So that's an excellent question. I think I'm going to separate Jewish overnight camp out from other immersive experiences and other Jewish informal experiences, simply because it's also a part of the bedrock of this community. And Jewish camping is the silver bullet. We all know that it provides a 24/7 immersive environment where children celebrate the joy of being Jewish. There's staggering results that have emerged from seeing children who attend Jewish overnight camp, including the increased behaviors, Jewish behaviors, connections in marriage, and 7 out of 10 leaders today in the Jewish world directly attribute their leadership to having attended a Jewish overnight camp. So just again, to paint a quick picture, we have approximately 1,500 children in one of our 4 non-ultra-Orthodox camps here in Montreal. It's also a very high penetration ratio, higher than most communities in North America. Half of the kids in Jewish overnight camp don't attend Jewish day school.
Wow.
And for many, Jewish overnight camp is their only touch with Jewish that they have. And where you form Jewish friendships, you come back, you're able to live Jewishly, and interestingly, bring that Jewish living back to their homes. So there's a lot of data that supports many families who never celebrated or Shabbat or lit candles, because their child comes back from camp and is so passionate and so involved, actually affects the behaviors of the families as well. So it's a very, very important piece for children, both children in Jewish day school, because formal Jewish education is not experiential, it's different, and specifically for children that come from non-Jewish day school in Montreal. There are different programs that we support for Jewish overnight camp. One of them is an incentive grant called the One Happy Camper Grant. And the idea is to incentivize any Jewish family to send their first child to a Jewish overnight camp. The idea being, once somebody tastes camp and experiences camp, they're coming back for more. It's right. Almost unheard of that a child comes home and says, "No more, Ma, I don't want any more of this, please."
Right. We're lucky if we drag them away at the end of the summer.
Yeah, so it's been very successful in offering Jewish overnight camp to parents who might be thinking of other options for their children. And based on the analysis and what we've learned from the CAPS program for Jewish Day School, we created a similar program called Camps Access for middle income families so they too would have access to Jewish overnight camp.
Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? I had no
And the,
idea.
yeah, and the beauty of it is that we actually hard market from Jewish Day School to Jewish overnight camp. And because 50% of the kids in Jewish overnight camp don't go to Jewish Day School, we also hard market the other way around to say, do you know that you could have access to this grant where you would pay no more than X amount of the tuition, for example.
Fascinating. How old or how new is that last project that you just spoke of?
I would say it's about 7 years old at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
been running it for many
I
years
have just
and
learned
been
something new.
evaluating the results, maybe less, maybe 6 years. And
Okay.
then we have to have the caveat that there was no Jewish overnight camp this summer.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. I'm so happy you mentioned that. I did not know about that, and that is excellent to know and to share with everybody. It wouldn't be a conversation about the Montreal informal Jewish immersive world without touching on birthright and March of the Living among so many other Israel trips. And I know whether it be Dorot or the CIT programs where they send some of the kids at camp to, but focusing on birthright and March of the Living. I don't know if you want to tease them apart from one another. Can you give us a sense of just what these experiences do for a Jewish young adult who participates in them? How are they changed? What happens to them when they come back? What is the positive impact that a birthright trip or a March of the Living trip will have on a young adult here in Montreal?
So when you're talking about a birthright or a March of the Living or the other trips that you mentioned, they're all immersive experiences. So it's a very targeted group of people that go on a deep experience and they share that experience. And it's a joint experience. So it's both learning about their history, their past, Israel, but more than that, it builds a cohort and it builds people who have similar experiences. And although there's often not a direct impact right afterwards, all research shows that it's a deep, deep touch during an individual's life. And it depends on the number of touches you have over your lifespan as to how you choose to live Jewishly. And I say that within the broadest context.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very important piece of a journey. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about younger ages, where you go from PJ Library, which is an unbelievable program.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first community in Canada to bring in the PJ Library program. And the PJ Library program provides books for children from the ages of 0 to 12 years old, PJ Library and PJ Our Way. Over 10,000 children have received these books to date.
Some of them even live in my house.
It actually has a 90% penetration rate for the market, for the age cohort. And it's just an incredible program. It delivers 12 books, one book a month, mm-hmm. directly to the child. And in essence, what it does is it changes beautiful moments of reading with your child into Jewish moments and bringing Jewish quietly into the home and building up a Jewish library. But the program doesn't stop there. It's grown significantly, and it's all about forging connections. There are many, I can't even tell you how many events. There was an event last night, in terms of children 0 to 3 years old. It was a Hanukkah event, and you had over 130 children, young children, with their families. So that's like 400 people, mm-hmm. all spinning like a dreidel together on Zoom and sharing an experience. So it has really been the onboard to Jewish life in our community. And if you think about Jewish life as a journey with different experiences along the way. PJ Library is that onboarding. That's where you get on the train. And we're very, very privileged to have this incredible program and incredible leaders who are driving this program and connectors who are working with populations in Vaudreuil and Chateauguay and Dorion and areas that we never knew there were Jews before, and Jews never had an opportunity to connect before. So that's really, we're trying to create a seamless journey where people can join to do Jewish in different ways at different times in their lives.
That's great.
So what you mentioned very early on, a lot of what we do is we look at a map of the community and we identify gaps in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the gaps that we recently identified was teens. And teens, we said, if you're going to Jewish school or Jewish overnight camp, that's great. But there's about 50% of the kids that don't go to either of these.
Right.
And for those kids, there was almost nothing available.
Right.
There was a small BBYO chapter, there was a small NCSY chapter, there was a couple of small things that were happening here and there.
Right. Outside of Tikva, there's just very little.
Yeah. And
said tongue in cheek, we are also struggling with our teens at Beth Tikva too.
They're difficult, they're a tough gang.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, after identifying
they're tough even at home, not necessarily in a Jewish programming environment.
Yeah, teens are a unique age. That is true. I'm very happy to say that I have gone beyond that with my children and now can look back.
Okay. Baruch Hashem. So 50% of teens, as you said, are in the system, whether that be formal schooling or summer camp. And by definition, that means 50% are not. So how does the community reach them? How does a synagogue reach them? How does a BBYO reach them? How does anybody reach teens who are not in? Is there a way to reach them?
There is absolutely a way to reach them, and we're seeing proof is in the pudding right now.
Okay.
All research shows that teens need to create their own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see themselves as young people. They see themselves as leaders in their own rights. The world is their oyster. They can lead. And one of the programs that really seemed to be a flagship program that was having incredible traction across North America was BBYO. And in the height of the pandemic, we launched a BBYO program, and with really the idea of building different chapters that represented the diversity of our community. And like I said in the beginning, we have a mosaic of the community. We have teens from the former Soviet Union. We have teens who are immigrants from France. We have teens who are living on the West Island. We have all different cohorts of teens. And in spite of the pandemic and virtually not being able to meet or almost not being able to meet in person, there's over 120 teens that are deeply engaged and are coming back and for more and more and more programming. We have teens calling up our program director saying, my friend is just participated in this event and I want to be part of it too. How do I register? How do I come on board? So we're seeing from nothing. And I look back over the last 6-7 months and I say, I can't even imagine our community now without this BBYO.
So how old is the coordinator?
The coordinator, we have a number of coordinators, and it works with a connector model, which is something that I mentioned in PJ Library. So it works with people who connect to the local constituents and speak their language, not literally, well, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, yeah.
So our coordinator right now, without giving anything away, is about 28 years old. And the other people...
Is that on the old side? Or that's the director of the entire program?
It's the director. It's the director.
What I'm getting at is the person who's interacting with the teens themselves. How old is that person?
They're in their early 20s.
Okay.
And very, very quickly, the whole model builds on identifying leaders and supporting them to lead and co-create events with their peers. So it's really peer driven, and it's resonating deeply with multiple communities across Montreal. It's whatever event is being hosted, we're blowing right through our numbers, which is just incredible. And it's not a one-off experience. It's teens that are forging connections, intimate connections, doing relational engagement with other teens, and building their own iteration of what this next generation of this community is going to look like.
That's amazing. I remember when I was a teen, how old was I? I was 16 years old, and in England, the model was based on Zionist youth groups, very similar to BBYO to a degree, but it was Zionist youth groups, and there was a great emphasis on teaching and education. And I remember as a 16-year-old actually running classes, programs in people's homes on Sunday afternoons. We would rotate the houses teaching about Zionism. And I remember being just a couple of years older than the kids who we were running the programming for. And ever since then, it has made me realize, I think it's a quote by JFK. What is the quote? Ever since David overcame Goliath, we have known that age has never been an impediment to Jewish leadership. It's a beautiful quote.
I haven't heard that one before, but it's beautiful.
And I remember as a 16-year-old being charged and challenged, you're a leader, go and lead, go and teach. And these are your people in your care, they're 14 years old, they're 13 years old, off you go. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We were 16 ourselves. And yet amazing, it was a fundamental event in my life. And that's why I was so curious to see how old the counselors are. But my follow-up question is, how Jewishly educational would you say these sessions are, if at all? I'm not familiar with the BBYO program, so share a little bit.
So I would start by saying, first, they need to be fun, because if it's not fun, they're not
coming. Absolutely.
And
yes.
Secondly, it's a well-oiled machine that is really rigorous in terms of helping teens formulate their view and what Jewish means to them and how to do Jewish. It connects them to the state of Israel. It connects them to history. It connects them. There's so many connections. It connects them to Jewish music and Jewish theater and Jewish culture, Jewish heritage. So it's really something for everyone, but the base of it is Jewish.
Right.
It's for Jewish teens to connect with Jewish teens locally, nationally, and internationally. And again, so much of the programming of BBYO is based on what you talked about, meeting in small groups, meeting in someone's living room, meeting in a park, meeting where in whatever. And now we're in this absence of being able to meet. And yet somehow through Zoom, they're hungry for the actual connection. And there's a huge lack of that because of COVID-19. Hopefully soon we'll be post-vaccine and we'll be back in a new reality. I don't know if I won't call it, but where we were, we'll be back in a new reality and it will start to look differently. But this is providing an opportunity for teens to connect among themselves and connect Jewishly in a time where isolation and is paramount, really. And just carrying forward with that string, Hillel has been working also with the Connectors program and working closely to connect small groups of people around very specific issues. So instead of having huge gatherings where you're counting people, this is about relational engagement, and it's about building clusters of people around issues that are meaningful and important to them. It could be advocacy, it could be racial equality, it could be, but everything is grounded deeply in Jewish. And that's really how this community and many communities are building themselves for the future.
Fascinating. So looking towards the future, and this is really the crux of what I wanted to draw out from you. What is our community? When I say our community, I mean Federation CJA. What does Federation CJA hope to see? What are some of the initiatives that you may be working towards, and some of the projects you're currently working on now with a view to hopefully release within the next 3 to 5 years, or maybe earlier, but within the next 5 years from now?
That's a great question. So certainly we're looking to continue to support Jewish day schools and Jewish overnight camps. That's a bedrock of our community, as well as supporting immersive experiences like PJ Library, PJ Our Way, Hillel, Birthright, March of Living, Moshe House, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Something that is also really important is cultivating the next iteration of professional leaders and lay leaders. We need to cultivate the leadership pipeline so that we will have leaders in our community to be leading not just within Federation, but the broader community, synagogues, schools, grassroots, you name it. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest changes that I've seen is that we are Federation, I'm talking from a Federation perspective. Yes. Federation is deeply committed to partnering with service providers, experiential educators and service providers who are hubs of innovation and are working with their own networks. So instead of looking to a model where we are at the center and we're allocating to agencies and they engage different audiences, we're looking at what are our strategic priorities and who are those hubs of innovation, the hubs of innovation across our community. Like, I'm just gonna, name a couple: Museum of Jewish Montreal, the Open Shul, Class Canada, Milan Chavura, the Jewish Learning Lab. And there's many other hubs of innovation, and they're reaching different constituents. And the important learning here is really putting the person at the center and following the person. Another enormous, I would say, initiative that we're embarking on is something that is called JLive. And JLive is a digital technology platform. What it is, in essence, is think of it as an easy button. Nobody thinks that the Jewish world is looking for a Jewish app, because we're not. But we do know that people like things at a click of a button today. And the problem is that Jews are seemingly disengaged, or their attention is going to other places. It's going to Netflix, and it's going to Snapchat, and it's going to Instagram, and it's like everything is a catch in the moment. And many organizations are still marketing to these people, young people in particular, via email, direct mail, and it's just like, it's like an overload in your inbox, and nobody reads anything, and they're missing out on opportunities that could really be meaningful and attractive to them. And at the same time, many organizations, institutions, grassroots are looking to connect to a customer, where a person in the community where their event would deeply resonate. So in essence, what this app does is it connects people to programs and programs to people. And it's based on age, demographics, personal interest. So you really are getting, I would say, targeted and relevant information that allows you to connect and register for a program. And it also provides the community of organizations anonymized data that they can see who's coming to my programs, which programs are resonating, where are the people coming from, so that the organizations can then tweak their programming to better suit their audiences. So that is coming to a theater near you very soon.
That is very ambitious.
We've been working on this for over a year, over a year. We are currently in our first beta, where we are running live events, and we are getting incredible traction. So yeah, by May we should be in full beta mode and running full steam ahead. And hopefully it will be a gift to the people in our community and the organizations in our community.
Wow. So if I am a participant, I will download an app, and this app, based on my interests, my age, my location, can give me an entire menu of all of the Jewish opportunities that are taking place. And am I correct?
You are correct, but you don't need to download an app.
Okay.
You could register. Let's say you were doing a program and it was on JLive, for example.
Right.
You would send your audience, here's the program, do you want to register? And they would register. It's just a very simple, clean, neat way of registering on this app. It does not collect anything unless you decide to register for the app.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
So a
like
centralized registration office for every event that the Jewish community is offering.
exactly. And it makes, from an organization's perspective, it much, much easier to post an event. You don't need graphic designers. It takes off a lot of the back end that is taking time, effort, and money from organizations who should be doing programs instead. Right. So it's really a tool that's here to serve both the participants and the organizations in our community.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Netana, thank you so much for this incredible presentation. I feel that you've painted a picture of so many different aspects and areas, whether it be from just the demographics of our community, ultra-Orthodox, mainstream, to formal schooling, summer camp, informal, PJ library, all the way through summer camps, March of the Living, and now with some of these very exciting developments. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or is there anything that you wanted to mention in the context of this painting that you've painted for us tonight?
I guess I will end where I started, that we have a wonderful community. Mm-hmm. We have a community with so much innovation, hubs of innovation that are percolating and coming up. We have a community that's diverse and is a mosaic. And I think that we should all be proud to be Jewish Montrealers. And thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to meet with you and talk with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, what a wonderful message to finish off on. Just a few days before we light that first Hanukkah candle, I'm sure that as we all light those candles, we'll be thinking and realizing just how lucky we are being Jewish, to be proud of our Jewish identity and reveling in what it actually means to engage in the pursuit of a full and rich Jewish life. Netana, Shek, thank you so much. I'm extremely excited about learning more and seeing more of the launch of the platform that you will be releasing, hopefully in May, you said, is the full beta mode. And our community is indeed very, very fortunate. I wish you good luck with all of your endeavors and all of your next steps. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and Chag Sameach.
Have a good night.